What's up, guys? It's been a while, and today I want to talk a bit about the Sony PlayStation 5, Microsoft's Xbox Series X. But before I get to that, I do want to just send my best wishes to all of you guys. I hope you guys are doing well with everything that's going on. I know that times are pretty tough right now for a lot of people, and things seem really dreary and stuff. So, we're going to get through this, and, we just got to care a little bit more about our fellow man and, just take care of ourselves a little better. Uh, so, I hope everybody's doing well, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So, there's not a lot going on in the gaming world, right? Except for all of this PS5, Xbox Series X stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. But in terms of game development and things like that, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. Uh, the gaming industry is like every other industry. This virus is going to affect everybody in a different way, but most people are going to feel the hit, if not directly, indirectly, somehow. So the good news is, I think that game development is something that is it's mostly guys working on a PC. Even if it's for a console, whatever the case is, uh, it doesn't really require a lot of interaction with other people. So I think this is the type of work, if there was any, that could actually be done from home. You actually have to have some of this equipment at home, whether it's a PC or these, console, whatever it is. I'm not. I mean, this is above my head, so I don't want to talk too much about that. But the point is, it's the kind. It seems like the kind of work that you could do at home. That being said, uh, even if most of this stuff can be done, by all of these people, these developers from home, it's still they are affected in some way, shape, or form. So I would expect that you know most projects are going to be delayed, pushed back, postponed in some cases, and in some cases even canceled, depending on what stage of development certain games are. So I normally most of what I talk about is NASCAR games. So the only thing that's on the horizon is NASCAR Heat 5. There isn't any news about it, and it was announced that it was going to be released earlier, but we don't really know what's going on at the company at 704 uh, or Operation Sports, whatever. I mean, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but let's just say 704. This is a worldwide thing that's going on. So we don't know. They were in the middle of hiring people. There's a lot of change happening. So this couldn't have happened at a worse time. So we don't know how it's going to affect everything. But I would assume, all right, this is just an assumption on my part, some speculation, that I wouldn't be surprised if NASCAR Heat 5 did eventually get pushed back a little bit. I'm not sure at what stage they are of development, but we don't know, right? Maybe they're at a stage where a lot of these developers can finish up from home. I mean, I'm not sure what's going on, but definitely it's something to think about, and I wouldn't be surprised, if it did affect things that way. Um, Definitely, whatever they got coming down the pipeline as far as the next gen, I would assume that stuff is definitely going to be on hold for some time. So that's really all I could speculate on in terms of that stuff. This is just me thinking out loud. So aside from that, I'm gonna get to the PS5 stuff. They just had their announcement this past week on of the official. Well, you could call it the official announcement for the PS5. But in actuality, what it is it was a sort of conference call for developers. So it was really highly technical, and a lot of it was boring, and a lot of people are screaming about it. They're upset. In terms of presentation, I think that, yeah, the Sony did a terrible job with it. There's no denying. People have been waiting for information for a very long time, especially with Microsoft already having revealed almost everything there is to know about the Xbox Series X. We know what it looks like. They've even had people dissecting the actual console. It's all over the internet. So there's a lot of good stuff coming from Microsoft. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a PlayStation guy. Now, when I say that, I want you guys to understand I hate tribalism. I do not like this fanboy bullshit that goes on between, Sony and Microsoft fans and this and that. I think it's incredibly juvenile and ignorant. I like to look at the industry like not as a Sony fanboy. I'm just a gamer. I enjoy these games. I enjoy talking about this stuff. And I don't know a lot about the actual technical aspects of game development, but I do like talking about a lot of things in terms of just an average gamer. Like, it's my point of view as an average gamer. I don't come at this as an expert on anything. So I hate that fanboy shit. So I want people to understand that, I'm going to give you my perspective on both consoles and what I see in the future, just as an average gamer, not as a fanboy or somebody who's got like a vested interest in one thing or another, or I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. And I like seeing what Microsoft's doing. I like it because it's good. It's good for PlayStation guys because it's pushing Sony to do more. So, it's that innovation, that push for innovation, that competition. That's what you want to see. So people that, like to take sides and say, ha ha, this Microsoft wins and Sony lost and they suck and it's underpowered and all that. I think that's negative. I think it doesn't serve any purpose. And I don't want to be a part of that discussion. I don't care for that. And I'm actually happy for Microsoft. I'm happy for the people that play Xbox and that platform. So, kudos. They have a lot to look forward to. So they did everything right in terms of presentation and getting all this information out. Like I said, people actually going to Microsoft and being able to dissect these consoles and see what all the inner hardware and really break everything down, all the specs. So everything that Microsoft did wrong in this current gen, or at least when the Xbox One came out versus the PS4, everything they did wrong, they did right this time around. They learned from their past mistakes. So I have nothing negative to say about Microsoft or the Xbox Series X. That console is a beast. It looks amazing. It looks exciting, right? And I'm saying this as a guy that plays PlayStation. And it's not that I'm married to PlayStation or that, hey, like I said, I don't like this tribal shit. So I don't have a problem admitting that Microsoft seems to have that upper hand in terms, at least on paper, in terms of pure power, right? And I haven't found any negatives to say about, their console. So kudos to them, and people, Microsoft people should be excited. So Sony, on the other hand, everything they seem to do right with the PS4, and I don't think it was, they so much that they did everything right. It's just that Microsoft really fucked up in this current gen or last gen, whatever you want to call it. But they seem to do a better job. Like, this is, you got to keep in mind, this is the first official reveal of what the specs are. And it was designed for game developers. So yes, it was heavy on a lot of stuff that people find boring. And, it wasn't really, I don't think it was ever meant to be their official announcement to the main public. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, this is how they chose to reveal the PS5. And I do expect them to do better going forward. At some point, they have to show what this console actually looks like. And they do have to go through the specs and the hardware in a more general sense for the average public. And I do think they'll do a better job of that down the line. When? Who knows? And I do think that they released this information or this presentation that was meant for the game developers. I think they felt pressured by Microsoft to do it. And they didn't have anything ready to do it the way that I'm talking about. This is what they had. So they said, let's just go with this. It has a lot of information. Just release this so that we can get, people off our back. I'm screaming about, where is the PS5? Where's the information? How many teraflops, right? So they finally did that, and as bad as the presentation was, and as boring as it was, we got what we were waiting for, which is, the teraflop count and the actual specs. So as horrible as the presentation was, and it was, we know now that the specs actually top out at 10.3 teraflops. And it's variable. So it's always going to be somewhere between 9 and 10 teraflops. So a lot of people are really disappointed with that. And I'm going to look at this from a different angle, because I think this is where I have to criticize just people in general. This idea, this whole teraflop thing, I think has gotten out of control. And I think that people are making a much bigger deal out of it than it really is. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Okay? There clearly is a difference between 12 and 10. 2 teraflops is significant. However, there are other variables that people do need to take into account. When it comes to game development, third-party games, which do make up the majority of games, let's be honest, most games, most of the biggest titles are third-party games. There are some huge first-party games. And in that sense, Sony has always had a big advantage. And to this point, at least up till now, it does seem like they still have an advantage when it comes to first-party games. I don't want to get too deep into it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If you're an Xbox guy, what do you care about the Sony exclusives? You're worried about your exclusives. And vice versa. Same thing with Sony. Sony's not worried about first-party Xbox games. They're worried about their own stuff. So I think that when it comes to first-party games, it's a wash. Everybody's got their own shit. Why worry about the other stuff? The thing that really comes into play is third-party games. Those are the games that you're going to see on both systems. That is really where people are worried. Hey, Xbox has an advantage. There's 2 teraflops. But this is where I'm going to tell people, don't get carried away with that. And again, I'm not downplaying anything. The Xbox is going to be more powerful. There's no denying it. Okay? And in teraflop count, yes, officially on paper, is more power. However, I think people are getting carried away. I think at the end of the day, when it comes to third-party games, you're not going to see a big difference between the two consoles. And I know there's going to be people out there who are going to deny that. They're going to tell you you're full of shit. It's going to come from fanboys. You know, they don't want to admit that really the difference isn't going to be that big. Game developers do not make two different games for each console. Okay? They make games that work that are optimized to work on both consoles. So they can't really squeeze out those 2 extra teraflops of performance. They might be able to, to an extent. I'm not saying you're not going to see any difference. What I'm saying is that it's not going to be a noticeable difference where you sit there and immediately see, yeah, this is clearly better than this. That's not going to happen. And I think that it's going to be people that do these comparison videos, and you're going to see countless videos. They're going to actually measure things like frame rate and pixel count, stuff like that. And you're going to need to do that to see the difference. Because from the naked eye, the average person isn't just going to immediately pick that up. We have reached a point of diminishing returns in technology. I'm going to use a quick example, okay? This 8K, 4K thing that's going on in the TV industry, right? They're pushing 8K really hard right now in the TV industry. But the truth is, and they did a study on this, okay? All the big manufacturers, TV manufacturers, were part of this study. They did a study where they sat a group of people and they watched, 8K content versus 4K. And they all sat at a normal distance, right? Meaning not up against the screen, 1 foot away where you're staring at the pixels. Normal viewing distance. And nobody, okay, could tell the difference which was 8K, which was 4K. Okay? And what I'm saying, I'm not saying there's not a difference. There is. But you have to get right in front of the TV to see that difference. So the 8K thing is a gimmick at this point because of the return on investment. So the reason that the TV industry did this study is to check the feasibility of making this investment. It's going to take a lot more bandwidth to push 8K. Okay, it took us a while to get 4K streaming, all that stuff, and they're already now talking about 8K. 8K is not necessary, is what I'm trying to say. The difference that you see between 8K and 4K is negligible. I'm not saying it's non-existent. I'm saying it's negligible. Okay? It's just not that big of a difference. To the naked eye, we have reached that point in technology where it's hard now to see the difference. When we looked at, let's say, the PlayStation 1 versus PlayStation 2, that was a huge leap. You could easily see the difference between games in those two consoles. And we started seeing three-dimensional graphics and started to see the early stages of open world games. That was the biggest leap in technology. That is like night and day. Then we went to the next generation, PS3. And you saw, once again, you did see substantial improvements. However, the leap wasn't as big as it was with the previous gen. Then we went to PS4, and as we go along each generation, what you can tell from the naked eye is going to be smaller and smaller. So what I'm trying to tell you is, 2 teraflops, which is the difference between these consoles, isn't what it was years ago. And a lot of people are saying, well, look, that's a PS4. 2 teraflops is a PS4 console. So on paper, it sounds like, holy shit, that's a lot of extra power. Imagine what you can do with that. The truth is, you're not going to ever really see that play out. Maybe in a first party title, for an exclusive for Microsoft, they may be able to squeeze out something that's clearly better. Maybe. Even then, I do think you're not really going to see that. But third-party games, the games that are across both platforms, I'm just telling you, you're going to see these games are going to look so close to each other. You're going to see higher frame rates on both consoles. You're going to see ray tracing. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, the Xbox is probably going to be able to do a little bit better of a job in ray tracing. Maybe, yeah, they may be right. But what I'm trying to tell you is, when you see the final product on 2 separate screens, you're not going to see that huge power gap that everyone's talking about. It's overblown. And I'm not saying this as, oh, I'm a PlayStation guy, so I'm trying to pump up the PS5. I can admit that, yes, technically on paper, Microsoft does have 2 teraflops more of power. But let's be honest, in real world settings, the differences aren't going to be that much. And this is why I brought up that example with the 8K, 4K thing. It's like the differences are going to be so small that it's not going to be that big a deal. So Microsoft, they hit it out the park. They did everything you could ask for from a console developer. So I'm not saying anything negative. What I'm saying is that this power gap is overblown. And I promise you, when you see the final product, the games are going to be so almost indistinguishable from each other. Okay? So we're talking about raw power, which most of it is pixel density, graphics, and frame rates, right? You're gonna be able to play at high frame rates. How high? I don't know. That's something I do think that is also being a little bit overblown on both consoles. I think there's people talking 120 frames. Maybe. On certain specific games, maybe. But the bottom line is you're going to get a lot better frame rate performance on both consoles. So really, the main aspects of gaming, graphics, frame rate, performance, both consoles are going to be great. I don't think you're going to see a big gap between the two. I just don't. So now we move on to other things. The big thing that Sony's pushing is the SSD. So once again, now one console has an advantage. Sony does have a clear advantage in the SSD. But I think, once again, at the end, other than faster load times, I don't think you're going to see a big difference, because Microsoft also has a very impressive SSD, and the bottom line, what I'm saying is, no matter if you play with Sony or Microsoft, you're going to get better load times. You're going to get superior performance. Everything that an SSD is equipped to do is going to be light years better than what you're getting now with current gens. So it's good news once again for both Sony and Microsoft. But Sony has an edge. Just like Microsoft has the extra 2 teraflops, Sony has much faster speeds. And on paper, it's twice as fast. That being said, Is it going to feel twice as fast? I don't think so. Really, if you see how fast the Microsoft loads up and all that stuff, it's pretty fucking fast. So once again, I think it's negligible for the most part. The other things that Sony talked about that the SSD is going to do, it sounds impressive on paper. There's a lot of customization, optimization that should give developers more tools. But once again, you're only going to notice those differences on first-party titles. Third-party games are not going to be able to take advantage of that because they also have to make sure that the games are optimized to run well on both consoles. So they can't take advantage of all these SSD enhancements by Sony. I'm talking about third-party games. So once again, you have a console that has an advantage that you're only going to notice maybe on first-party titles. So just like I said that you're not going to see a big difference when it comes to those extra 2 teraflops, you're not going to see that big of a difference in terms of the things that the SSD is required to do. Because game developers cannot take full advantage of those differences. Because their games have to work on both platforms. Right? So, am I being fair? I think I'm being fair. Right? And I think a lot of people, fanboys or whatever the case is, they want to overlook certain things. Sony fanboys want to say, well, that SSD is going to make a huge difference and it's going to destroy, Sony's clearly better. They're going to do things better. Everything's optimized. But they're ignoring the whole game development side of things where you're not going to be able to take full advantage of all these extras on third-party games. And on Microsoft's side, you got Microsoft fanboys bragging about the two extra teraflops. And really, when it comes to third-party games, which makes up the majority of games that are out there, they're not going to get that extra advantage on the games. It's not going to happen. Whatever improvements on either console is going to be minimal in third-party games. First-party games, who knows? I'm interested to see what happens there. So, in summary, what I'm trying to tell people is, it doesn't matter if you're a Sony or Microsoft guy, there's so much to be excited about. These consoles are both beasts. They are powerful. Both companies are doing what they should have done this current gen, which both consoles came out underpowered. And no matter who you are, if you buy either console, you should be very happy with what you're going to get. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter which system you're on, you're going to get great graphics, great frame rates, performance-wise, great load times, and that's something that I honestly, for me, personally, it's one of the things that excite me the most. And I know a lot of people don't really think about this stuff, but, you do spend a lot of time in a lot of games waiting for games to load up, waiting for levels to load up. And I think that once you start playing games and you start really realizing how much faster everything is happening and how much less time you're sitting around waiting for things to load, you're going to appreciate that. And I really am excited about that. So the point is, both consoles are awesome. At least on paper. They look like they're going to be fantastic. And I just wish more people would just say, we're all going to be getting a much better gaming experience. You're fighting and nitpicking over areas of these consoles that are not going to make as big of a difference as people think they are. Because Most games are third-party games, and developers cannot pick and choose and just say, well, we're going to take full advantage of the much faster SSD on a Sony. Well, how's that going to work for the Microsoft platform? You can't do that. You might be able to do little things here and there, but honestly, it's not feasible. It's not cost effective. They have to create games that work across both platforms. And that's why, the differences aren't going to be that big. They're just not. So those are my thoughts. I'm interested to know what you guys think, how you feel. And yeah, both consoles are going to be great. What's wrong with that? It's good. They're pushing each other. Really, I don't know what else to say, but I am excited about it. And one last thing I do want to say. I made the comparison about the 8K, 4K TVs, right? And I hope people will understand, I was not saying there's no difference. I'm saying that from a normal viewing distance, the average viewer is not going to pick up the difference. It's just not going to be worth the cost. And in that sense, these 2 extra teraflops are just not that big of a deal, as everyone's making it out to be. Okay? There is going to be some difference. I'm just telling people it's not going to be that big. It's not going to matter as much as people think, for the reasons I mentioned. So, and my last point, speaking of comparisons, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second. Let's just say, for instance, that Microsoft was not the first to announce all of their specs, and Sony came out first. And when they came out and they said, look, this machine is going to top out at 10.3 teraflops. And we didn't know anything about what Microsoft is doing. Everyone that is upset about Sony and screaming about that it's underpowered, I guarantee you, they would be screaming about how awesome and how much of a beast this console is. 10.3 teraflops. And now, because Microsoft came out first and they announced 12, and that is a beast, since they were the first and it was a 12 teraflop announcement, now all of a sudden 10 teraflops doesn't look like much. It's all perception. That's all it is. If you didn't know anything about the 12 teraflop Microsoft thing, you would be ecstatic about 10.3 teraflops. You'd be like, holy shit! Those specs are comparable to high-end PCs. But only because, by comparison, Microsoft has a 12 teraflop machine, all of a sudden 10 teraflops is, it's underpowered. It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm just saying, at the end of the day, people are arguing over things that are not going to be as big of a deal as they think. Both consoles are going to deliver high-end performance. And that's what people should be, both Sony and Microsoft fans should be thrilled. They should be happy. And I don't think anybody is going to leave, the PlayStation brand because of 2 teraflops. They're not going to just leave because, oh shit, there's 2 extra teraflops over here, I'm walking away. And by the same token, nobody's going to walk away from Microsoft because, oh shit, Sony has a faster SSD and they're going to be doing some little cool little optimization and customized tricks with the SSD that that it's superior to here, so I'm going to leave Microsoft. Nobody's going to do that. Both communities should be happy with what they have, and I don't see anyone leaving camp. They're not going to do it. There's not enough of a difference here for anyone to do that. And at the end of the day, it comes down to games. And the third-party games are going to dictate that both consoles are going to perform great, and both consoles are going to be sort of even. So that's what I think is going to happen. And I think that people who keep complaining about the difference or bragging about the 2 extra teraflops, or Sony people bragging about, oh, this SSD is light years better than, it's twice as fast as Microsoft, you're not going to notice that as really. It's just everybody should be happy, and I just think people are making too much of it. So those are my thoughts. I'm sorry for the long video, but it is what it is. So I look forward to your comments, and I'll talk to you guys when there's something else to talk about later.